Hello. So this video is a performance review of Kari Williamson and Nate Schierman's Slain at the Speakeasy, which is a full-length play adaptation of an original murder mystery party script, semi-scripted murder mystery script by Stefanie Austin. It was performed by Zapkin Theater Company, which is the community theater company that I am a part of, and it was directed by Henry Morello. So it's an interesting play because of that evolution, right? That it starts as a semi-scripted murder mystery comedy, meaning that portions of the action are written out as a script, but then a large portion of the original performance was built around the characters interacting with members of the audience and being asked questions and giving answers and things like this, so that the audience could try to work out who committed the murder. This version, the newer version, is a full-length scripted play, but it still has that interactive component because this is one of the plays that Zapkin frequently does, where the majority of the action is scripted, but then there is a brief intermission type period in which the characters come around to people's tables. It's a dinner theater production. The characters come around to people's tables, and again, audience members ask them questions, try to gather information, and figure out who committed the murder. So, while this version is much more scripted, it still has that interactive component that's really quite central to Zapkin's performance ethos. So, Slain at the Speakeasy is set in a 1920s speakeasy, 1928 to be specific, called Ruth's. It's run by Ruth Mason. Well, it's owned by Ruth Mason, but it's now largely run by her daughter Louise, and the main attractions at this speakeasy are Annie Marconi's singing and the apparently just incredible bootleg alcohol by Moonshine Mary. Moonshine Mary is a new supplier of alcohol to Ruth's, or relatively new. Prior to this, they'd worked with a gangster named Frankie. And Frankie is not too keen on Moonshine Mary cutting into his business, nor is Nicky, the mafia boss from the next county over, both of whom come to Ruth's to try and investigate who Moonshine Mary is and to try and persuade Louise to bring Ruth's business back to Frankie or over to Nicky, depending on which of them is doing the persuading. Now, this contravenes one of Ruth's two main rules: no business and no guns. And so Ruth is constantly getting frustrated that everybody in this speakeasy is talking business. Alongside this group of mafia leaders, dons, bosses, whatever it is, you have Bugsy, who is a mafia goon, I guess is the best term for it, who is working both for Frankie and for Nicky, though neither of them know that he's working for the other. When that is revealed, neither of them is thrilled. You have William Werner, the chief of police, who is also on Frankie's payroll and Ruth's payroll. He is supposed to be investigating the murder of Jimmy Mason, Ruth's husband, who was killed several weeks ago, and so far he has not figured out who committed that crime. He gets increasingly drunk over the course of the play because he's under a lot of pressure. And then you have the other two women in this in this speakeasy. You have Dorothy, the cigarette girl, who's dating Bugsy. And you have Rosie, who is technically dating Frankie, but is also on the sly dating Bugsy. So Bugsy is really caught at the center of two triangles, right? The triangle between himself, Frankie, and Nikki, his two employers who don't know about each other, and the triangle between himself, Dorothy, and Rosie, the two women that he's dating. Rosie does know that he's dating Dorothy, but she kind of doesn't believe it in a way, right? Like she believes that Bugsy is actually dedicated to her, even though he's dating Dorothy officially. And Dorothy has her suspicions, but she doesn't know for sure for most of the play that Bugsy is also dating Rosie. And then the last character, really kind of our host in a way, is Maxwell Parker. Parker is a private investigator who's been hired by Annie to look into Jimmy's death. He is really sort of our noir film hero, right? Like you have the stereotype of the film noir in which you have the voiceover of all the gin joints in all the world she had to walk into mine, this kind of thing, right? Where you have the hard-boiled detective who's reflecting back on the story that we are seeing unfold in the movie. That's Maxwell Parker. We start with him, and it's very much a sort of, it was a rainy night when she walked into my life. She was a damsel in distress. All these sort of cliche film noir things. But it's presented, again, in this very humorous way. Because, so Jack Donahue played Maxwell Parker. And that opening bit, and actually, this is the cool thing about this, is each actor in this show sort of had their own individual style, trademarks, their sort of unique ways of creating their characters that made these people really make sense within the 1920s context. So, Jack, one of his sort of things was he had a very distinctive stance, and then he had repeated gestures that he used. So for his stance, one thing he would often do, he did wear a white fedora with a black band. And one thing that he would often do when he wasn't immediately speaking was tilt his head down so that the brim of the fedora would hide his face and sort of hunch slightly forward, sort of like this. Just imagine this with a fedora so that my face is hidden. And he was this very much sort of mysterious posture, right? I guess that's really what the intention of it was. The sort of physicality of it was to create a sort of mystery, an air of this person is hidden in some way. There's something about them that is not open and immediately visible. Another one of his sort of trademark things was he would periodically come to an important part of dialogue, and he would punctuate it with a sharp turn to the side and double finger guns. It was good. It worked really well. But the thing that I was going to say, the opening bit, Maxwell comes out and he's doing this. It was a rainy night when she walked into my life, and Kari Williamson, who played Annie, comes down to because she had started up on the stage. He started down in the orchestra, really the floor level in front of the stage. She comes down wearing a raincoat, and he's like, wait, no, it was snowing. And so she has to go back up, and Tara Kaimi, who played Louise, pulled out a fur winter coat from behind the bar, tosses it to Annie, and Kari puts it on, goes back down, and he's like, and Maxwell's like, no, wait, it was raining. So she has to take the fur coat back off. So yeah, these sort of fun little bits with these stereotypical elements of film noir, gangster movie style dialogue. There's a lot of fun elements to it. There was a bit for it. So some of the bits are contemporaneous, and some of the bits are anachronistic, which I really like. I think it was an interesting balance to it. For instance, Annie and Louise have these sort of big dreams of becoming professional business owners, politicians, wealthy, etc., etc. And Annie is going to invest in the stock market. And she has this line, "There's no better time to invest in the stock market than 1928, which of course is funny in retrospect because of the tragic stock market crash of 1929. Yeah, so I mean, that's not a funny thing that occurred. It ruined millions and millions of people's lives. But as a bit, it's good because we have that dramatic irony, right? Where we, the audience, know something that the character doesn't. So that's only funny from the perspective of contemporaneousness. But there's also a lot of anachronistic things. There's a bit where Maxwell, Annie, and Nikki are sort of doing these sort of competing references to Michael Jackson songs. And Frankie, played by Daniel Skiles, Frankie is not the brightest gangster, and he continually like messes up popular sayings and things like that. Frankie bursts in with not something that fits into the conversation the way that Maxwell, Annie, and Nikki had been doing, but he bursts in with, "This is what it sounds like when the doves cry." And they mock him for doing Prince when they were all doing Michael Jackson. And the thing that I liked particularly about it was that in response to their criticism of him for bringing in the wrong artist, Frankie says, "Relax." Which was very, very small, very, very quick, but I really thought that was quite good. Skiles does a really good job playing gangster-type characters. He lowered his voice from its normal register. He has a fairly deep voice normally, but he lowered it. He spoke very slowly. He drew his words out like this. And yeah, it was a really good construction of that sort of somewhat dim-witted gangster figure. And again, so all of these characters had their own sort of little quirks, their own things that were interesting about them. And that's one of the things I really do like about Sock and Buskin is we often pay attention to those little details that help really sort of lift a show and make things more interesting, make characters more interesting, make bits within a script more entertaining and more legible in a way for audience members. This is a really, really good job.